Hi folks, Slicers here. Here's a slightly unusual knife for my channel, but while we've been on lockdown I have taken the opportunity to carry a lot of knives that just aren't allowed in the UK normally, but because I'm only leaving the house maybe once a week instead of every day, I have slipped into my pocket something nice. Now I have had for a long time, I've had only two knives from Benchmade, which are the 940 and the Proper. Both are S30V and both very much sort of standards in the knife world. The Proper has never really been a favourite of mine. I do like the green canvas micarta, it's really nice, and I like the blade shape, but the action on it is a bit rubbish, and I'm just not into the modern traditional thing. Much as this might come as a surprise and sometimes perhaps a shock, but the idea of having the screws in the knives doesn't really appeal to me. The fact that I like to carry an Enzo PK70 flies in the face of that, but in terms of my collection knives, it's just not something that I go for, and I just never quite see this knife as practical as it could be. It's certainly not as practical in my mind as the Enzo, but you know, it's been there. Another thing about these two knives is that they're blue class knives. This is another blue class knife. The 940 Osborne I've had for a long time, and it's just one of those knives that I keep thinking, it's had its day, we'll put it away, but I just keep getting it back out again. And I always say this is, before Microtech started putting out Bounty Hunter Boba Fett knives, I kind of thought mine was getting that Boba Fett look about it. It's really quite worn. It's been around a long time. Blade's a bit scratched up, but what that might tell you is that this knife is actually a pocket favourite of mine. I carry this knife an awful lot. So I was thinking the other day about trying something different, and I got this. Now this is the Benchmade Baleout. I mean, actually, I should sort of step back one thing. In the meantime, I got a bug out, and I just really didn't like it. I put it in my hand, and I just thought it felt plasticky and trashy. Now, I believe they're a lot tougher than they look and they feel, but it just felt, it didn't feel like a quality premium knife in my pocket, whereas this does. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that, but the main one is the fact that this is like the 940. This is aluminium. It's got that kind of chalky finish that the 940 had originally, but it's long gone on that. It's long used. This is it's got a sort of faint diamond pattern on it, which gives it just that little bit of grip. And funnily enough, not that I can do it, but I tried, but when I first got it, you couldn't do that. It was really quite stiff. It needed a bit of break in, but I did manage on day one, I can't do it now, to flick this knife open. It's the first knife with thumb studs I've ever managed to flick open. So I was quite pleased with that. It's got very good action. It's just phosphor bronze washers, just like the other two Benchmades. But it took, say, 24 hours and a tiny drop of mineral oil just to free it up a little bit. But within a few hours, it was broken in, and it was lovely. Now, this has a CPM M4 blade. Now, M4 is a tool steel, and as a result, it can be heat treated and hardened to really quite a high Rockwell 62 on the Rockwell scale in this particular case, I believe, and that should give it pretty good edge retention. So far I haven't really had to test that, except in as much as when it arrived, it had what I would call a Benchmade edge on it, so it was a bit toothy and not especially sharp. Not really. I mean, I went to cut some paper with it, and it was hanging up quite a bit. So I haven't sharpened it, but I have given it a strop, and I treated the two edges as separate edges. So I stropped this edge, I stropped that edge, just the same way that I might with the tack razor or something like that. And because I want to try and preserve this point here, and I think there's a danger if you try and treat it as one edge, that will eventually round out. And I like that edge there is quite useful. You can use that. You can treat this knife as though it was a Warncliffe knife and that was the tip. When you're cutting something on a table or a board, you've got a scraping edge here and you've got a piercing point here. So you've got that sort of choice of edges. The downside to tool steel is that it is prone to rust, and it will rust quite badly. So what they've done here is they've given it a Cerakote coating in grey, which I'm not wild about, and it does make it look like it should be quite rough and therefore draggy when it's slicing. It isn't, because Cerakote is actually quite slippy. So it does work well as a slicer. It's a very thin blade. I haven't measured it, but it's certainly sort of 2 millimeters rather than 3. And it comes to a very fine point. It's a fine edge rather. It's flat ground edge. Of course, we've got the axis lock, which is the thing that I really like, because even if you can't flick the knife out in the thumb stud method, you can, if you can pull the catch back, flick it out like that. So if my hands are, if you're new to this channel, you'll realise my hands are just a bit rubbish. But if I can open that, then you can. I have to say though that my 940, because it has a heavier blade, I think, and also, it's decades of use rather than months, days of use. It's just easier to flick, and of course the Proper doesn't flick at all. Now, the only downside is not the only downside. One of the downsides, I moved the pocket clip, which was a very nice small pocket clip, deep carry. I moved it from one side to the other. Unfortunately, the screws were Loctited into place, and as I slipped while I was doing it, I took a gouge out the green. Now, I don't really mind too much, because I think this knife is a stayer. It's not something I'm going to move straight on. If it was, I wouldn't have bothered moving the clip. And when I think of the chips and things that are in my 940, I just think of them as, that edge is really quite scratched along there. But, in time, that's what happens to a knife if you use it. And in some ways, if you find somebody who's got a knife that looks like that, you do kind of think they obviously like that knife, because if they didn't like it, they wouldn't be using it as much as this clearly has been used. So I'm sure this will get to be the same in the end. Now, it has this extended tail here, which gives you a lanyard ring. In the bug out, the lanyard ring is cut into the scales here, whereas here you have this small sort of, you could call it a back spacer, it's more like an end spacer, and that gives you this lanyard ring, and also gives you this glass breaker. Glass breaker is just stupid. There's no benefit to that glass breaker, absolutely none whatsoever. It's just a pain. What I'm going to do about it, I don't know. You can get a titanium backspacer, which goes up to the screw here actually, and that removes the lanyard ring and the glass breaker. I quite like the idea of the lanyard ring, so I'm toying with the idea of maybe just grinding this down, but it's not bothering as much as it might, or it hasn't bothered me as much as it might yet. So I've not done anything with it yet, but I might yet consider that. In terms of user, I still can't get that flick, but that thin slicey blade works really well. Whether it's better to be a tanto than a drop point, I don't know. I think I would probably go for the drop point. I only have two what they call tantos. I mean, it isn't actually a tanto blade, but there are a number of things about it that don't ring true as a tanto. But I only have one other, which is the tack raise from Tops, which is a knife I use an awful lot, surprisingly more than most. It lives on my my other desk, and I that whenever something comes in from the post, it's usually the first knife that I go for. It has a recurve blade and a curved tanto, so that's different. In terms of tanto, Japanese tantos very rarely have this shape of blade with the Yakoti. Well, this hasn't even got a Yakoti line. It's got the corner in here, but there's no discernible line going up into the blade. So it's not even sort of Hanzakuri type knife. It's just a stylized take on the Japanese sort of katana or wakizashi tip, the kasagi with the Yakoti line. So I always find the term tanto a little bit difficult, but it at least describes, people know what you mean when you say it, so it works. Anyway, in terms of size, this is larger in the handle than the 940. It's broader, but it's thinner. And in terms of length, about the same. The blade, I think, is actually a fraction shorter. Not so much as to make any difference. Cutting edges are actually longer on this because of the two edges, but it's broadly similar in size, and I quite like that size because it's a sort of in-betweeny size in a way. I mean, if I forget my UK legal carrier comparators and instead take two that will be very familiar perhaps to most knife people in the world, you'll see that it falls between the small and the large Sebenza. I sometimes find the small Sebenza just a little bit too small because I've got extra large size hands, and I just find the handles just a tad on the small side. Nice knife though, and I carry that quite a lot, or have done over this last year. The large Sebenza are much more comfortable in the hand, but it does look like quite a chunky bit of knife when you're carrying it, presenting it. I say in the house, and there's nobody to tell me off. I don't know that it matters a great deal, but I just think this is it's got this very similar size blade to the small Sebenza. It's very slightly longer, but the handle has just got a little bit more real estate that I just find better for my large hands. In terms of traditional size comparators, there it is compared to the 93mm Swiss Army knife, and obviously it's quite a bit bigger, but bear in mind this just isn't street legal in the UK without a good reason. And I'll say that, and that's the Enzo PK70. Again, this is a 70mm blade, whereas this is 3¼ inches or something, or 3.4 inches. whenever I say this isn't street legal in the UK, somebody will always say, unless you've got a good reason. And I get fed up with that because it's such a lot of tosh. What is the good reason that you would have to carry this knife as opposed to a slip joint knife? Now you can say, oh, it's safer because it doesn't lock on my fingers. Well, the law doesn't give a toss about that. They're not interested. What they're interested in is, what is it that you need specifically this knife with this lock and this extra long or longer than 3-inch blade? What's the specific reason that you need that? Now, you really have to have a pretty good reason. And with this is a Benchmade black box. Black boxes are tactical, so this thing is a tactical blade. And a lot of people will tell you that a tanto is a tactical blade. Now, when they say tactical, what they mean is for stabbing people, self-defense or offense. Well, you know, that's certainly not going to win you any favors if you're stopped by the police in the UK. There has to be a specific reason why you need that lock and that length of blade that you for a job that you couldn't do with that. And you better be on your way to or from it, or actually doing that job at the same time. And really, the other thing is, I wouldn't want to spend the night in the cells waiting to explain in front of a magistrate why I think that knife is suitable, when the risk is that you can spend up to 4 years in jail as a result. I just don't think that's a risk worth taking. So when I say that's not legal to carry in the UK, as I say, you better have a pretty good reason for carrying it. I've often used my 940 as a fishing knife, and I put it in my pocket. I put it in my fishing kit when I'm heading off fishing. But I also have in there a fixed blade filleting knife. So you know, I say I'm going equipped for that job, but it's very difficult to think of a good reason why you would need this knife specifically. It's not a great work knife if you're working on a building site or something like that. It's certainly not specifically a gardening knife if you're doing anything gardening. It just, you know, it's a nice thing to have, and it's great to have in the collection. It's great around the house. It's really good for carving up fruit, but so's that. So, you know, it's difficult to justify. So anyway, rant over. This is the Benchmade Baleout. I really like it. I've been carrying it quite a bit. Unfortunately, it's got a bit of competition at the moment. But the really best thing about this knife is the fact that this M4 blade should retain its edge better than pretty much anything short of a Rockwell, because this is 62, Rockwell is 67. You know, that theoretically shouldn't ever need sharpened. All I've done with this is strop it. I would quite like to sharpen it and give it a nice shiny edge, because it's a bit of a dull toothy edge at the moment, but I'm resisting the temptation to do that yet until it needs it. Anyway, thank you very much. If you like this stuff, please give it a thumbs up. I'll get a few thumbs down for having a go at people for carrying everyday knives, but there we are. And if you want to see some more of it, please feel free to subscribe, and we'll hopefully get some more content coming. I'm trying my very best to keep some content coming. I've so much stuff still to review and show you, but we're getting there. Okay, thank you very much. Bye.